Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Nile Hassan, back with a brand new episode here on The Truth. Back once again with my boy, AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing today? I mean, you guys don't know what happened off the air, but after we finished that last clip, you were itching your eyes like a madman. What's going
Yeah,
on?
I don't know. I just decided I can't see anymore. What eyes weren't doing the eye things.
I just thought it was funny. We ended the recording because we're recording these back to back, and you instantly took off your glasses, massaged your eyes, and I was making sure you're okay. Had to, wait like a minute to get back on track. So good to know that you're doing good. But anyways, guys, today we're going to be doing our final running back rankings. If you guys missed last show, we did the quarterbacks. Now we're going to do the running backs. We're going to be doing the top seven, going from 7 to 1. Some may be the same, some may be the same players, but in different spots, or some may be completely different as a whole. So should be fun, should be exciting. If you guys do want to see the full running back rankings as well as the full overall quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, special teams rankings, make sure you subscribe to The Truth at $2.99 a month. Get you those unlimited rankings and special episodes to come in the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with our running backs and your number 7 running back this fantasy football season.
Yeah, so number 7, I have Derrick Henry. Just turned 31 at the end of next year. Coming over to a much better situation than what he was at. And I get it's Derrick Henry, maybe he should be higher, but he's getting a little bit older. And even though he's on the Ravens, much better O line, much better just overall system he's going to be playing in. I just don't see him having a huge year. I see him having a really good year, though. And the reason why is because I think there's going to be a lot of attention on that backfield, mainly on Derrick Henry because of play action, or potentially just reads, QB reads there. Derrick Henry is going to take a lot of that attention there, and I think a lot of teams are going to have to stack the box because of Derrick Henry being there, which will limit the potential of him not getting the ball, but how many yards he will average on the year. One of the big things, though, is, or on the other hand, he had to deal with a lot of that when he was in Tennessee with stack boxes because the quarterback play wasn't really that good and everyone knew he was getting the ball. I mean, last year he was kind of down on touches, even though he played all 17 games. He only had 280 touches, which was better than some years, but he's also had years where he's been at 303, 378, 350, or 349. Last year, 1,167 yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. He has gone better through the air these past couple of years. Last year, 28 receptions. The year before that, 33. But he's not going to give you much, between 2 to 300 receiving yards, right around there. He also is not going to give you a receiving touchdown, most likely. He only has three throughout his entire career. And the last time he had one, he had two in 2019. So on the receiving side, especially on running backs and for fantasy, especially if you're in a PPR league, those receiving backs, those workhorse running backs that are also really good receiving backs, that aren't just like downhill guys. They're more that hybrid. They're gonna be a lot more, have a lot more value in fantasy. I just think Derrick Henry's still so good, that even though he doesn't provide you a lot of PPR, a lot of receiving value, him being with the Ravens on with a much better O line, much better system, just everything being so much better for him, that he's still going to finish at the top 10 running back.
So my number 7 running back is going to be Kenneth Walker, and this may come oh my gosh, a surprise to people. Clearly, a surprise to myself as well. No, Kenneth Walker, the third from Seattle, is going to be my number 7 running back, and this is truly an upside pick. I mean, last year, 219 carries, 905 yards, 8 touchdowns, both his rookie and second season. I'm hoping he takes that step up. His average draft position is the end of the third round, early fourth round, so all in all, I mean, he's a guy that you could get a good bang for your buck. I think more than anything, he's going to be kind of a pound for pound goal line back. I did really like Charbonnet last year. I like him again this year, but Seattle's quarterback play, I think, is going to be spotty. Yeah, they're going to probably try to pass the ball a lot with Geno Smith. And even if Geno Smith gets benched, they have Sam Howell. So I think there's going to be a heavy focus on running, even though Pete Carroll's been there the last 16 years, no longer the head coach. And I feel like obviously with Pete Carroll every year, it was like emphasis on running the football, running the football. They bring in the guy I can't think of from Washington, who pass with Penix. I still think they're going to run the ball very efficiently, and that's going to set up Geno and his ability to throw the ball downfield because that's what really led to Geno's success in his comeback season not too long ago. So For Kenneth Walker as a whole, I think it's a win-win situation. I'd see him upwards of at least 12 touchdowns, 250 carries, and get it back over to 1,000 yards, which would be a really great fantasy season, especially when I feel like the running backs today and age are up by committee. So having one or two main stars on your teams can be the difference for winning that fantasy championship. What about your number six?
At 6, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs last year only played in 15 games, so he missed 2 games there. But he had less than 200 attempts and had 945 rushing yards, also 10 rushing touchdowns, with splitting time with David Montgomery. And he is the clear receiving back there between him and Montgomery. Last year, 53 receptions, 316 yards, only one receiving touchdown. I expect those numbers to go up on the receiving side because Montgomery's really not going to give you any or much receiving upside. And I get Montgomery's probably going to be more of that goal line back there. And he's going to take a lot more of those touchdowns. But it seemed like Montgomery on first and second down where it was in there. And Gibbs, was, at least early on in the season, he was more of that third down back receiving option. It was more of a third and long situation. And then started getting integrated more into the offensive going into the first and second down. But going into the second year, I mean, Gibbs was a top pick for a reason and kind of out of nowhere. I know we were both surprised by the pick and a little bit confused, but he showed off what he was able to do, and I expect him to, even though he finished as the running back 10 last year, I expect him to take a step forward. I mean, if he plays 2 more games, he's easily in over 1,000 rushing yards. He's probably pushing 400 receiving yards, closer from 50 receptions to like 60, 65, and probably another receiving touchdown there. I think in all ways with this Rams offense, they're more of a ground and pound at first, and then they go into that play action of Jared Goff, more of that West Coast style offense that he was very comfortable with McVay, being able to kind of have more of that play action once they establish that running game, which will also help Gibbs because off those play actions, uh, they will run uh, passes for Gibbs more often, and I kind of see Gibbs having more of that Alvin Kamara like season next year. I think the receptions will go up. I don't think he will have a huge amount of rush attempts. I think Montgomery and him will be very split at that. But I think he'll be just so much more efficient. Like if you guys can imagine the year Kamara and Mark Ingram had a few years ago when they're both Pro Bowlers, I could see that as Gibbs and Montgomery this next season.
So for me, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry. I've always been a big Derrick Henry fan. I think Derrick Henry's in the best situation, quite frankly, of his career. Derrick Henry is one of those guys that's just been a great running back throughout his entire career. Coming out of Alabama back in the second round, he's age 30, so obviously he is older. Last year, still managed to get 280 carries, 1,167 yards, and 12 touchdowns, and quite possibly the worst offensive line in NFL history. I mean, I was a Derrick Henry fantasy owner, so I watched a lot of Tennessee Titans game, and I'm just thankful that I was not a Tennessee Titans fan because I'd probably want to kill myself watching the offensive line try to create holes for Derrick Henry. It just wasn't there. And I feel like that's kind of been recent for Derrick Henry. I mean, there was a time when Derrick Henry was the RB1, clear RB1 in fantasy. Back in those 2019, 2020 days, we had 16, 17 touchdowns. One year in 2020 had 2,027 yards on 378 carries. I mean, yeah, talk about peak of a career. That was insane. Do I think he's going to get to those numbers? No. Do I think he's going to have 370 carries? No. But he's in a really great situation now with Baltimore. He was brought in to save Lamar, as I mentioned in the quarterback show. Lamar obviously takes a lot of hits, does a lot of running. Derrick Henry is brought in as that sure running back. Obviously, Dobbins has dealt with some injuries, was no longer there. Gus Edwards was relatively reliable. They still got Keaton Mitchell. So a lot of options to choose from, but they brought Derrick Henry in for a reason. They brought Derrick Henry to get those big third downs, the third and ones, and those goal line carries as well. And as a running back, you want to see your running back into the end zone a lot of times. That's going to generate a lot of fantasy points. I think Derrick Henry is going to be on a peak position for that, and really could push top 5, even top 3. But I'm going to stay with the safe bet for now because it is his first season in Baltimore with the number 6 overall. All right, your number 5.
At number 5, I have Saquon here. Saquon when you talk about Derrick Henry being in a better situation, it's a complete 180 for Saquon. Going from the Giants to Philly, stays within that division there. It's honestly probably going to have 2 of his best games when he plays the Giants again in those 2 games. But last year, only played in 14 games, missed 3 games there, but had almost 250 rush attempts there, 962 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns. Through the air, 41 receptions, 280 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. as when I talked about in the quarterback show of Jalen Hurts losing a lot of those rushing touchdowns when he had 15, I believe it was, I think a lot of those are just going to go right to Saquon. I think Saquon will easily get to double-digit touchdowns there, 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, there was one point in Saquon's career where he had 91 receptions for 721 yards his rookie year. He had 121 targets on the Giants his rookie year as a running back. Now, I don't think he'll do that, but you know, if he can get to 50 receptions for me, get me 350, 400 receiving yards, 4 to 5 touchdowns there, and still do what think he's going to do on the ground, be a 1,300-yard rusher, in my opinion, mainly because he's going to be the only running back there or he's going to be the 1 through 3 down back, probably, maybe here and there on third down they give him a little bit of a break. But double-digit rushing touchdowns, I think there's a very good chance of that. And like, he probably would have had that last year or close to it if he played those 3 more games with the Giants. I mean, he was dealing with injuries early on and then had to kind of restart his season again after missing those weeks early in the season. He kind of was off a slow start, and at the end of the year, I want to say the Giants got it going, but when Saquon got it going, he kind of hit that groove. I want to say it was week 12 through 16, or maybe it was through 17, where he was, I want to say, getting almost like 95 yards on the ground and was averaging like 7 or 8 receptions a game.
So for me, I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is the epitome of a, stud college running back that can translate really well to the NFL. Obviously, I watched him a lot being a Hawkeye fan at Wisconsin and just absolutely run down our throats. And him, like Derrick Henry, are similar in the fact that they both are similar big time backs, I would say. I would feel like Taylor's a bit more elusive, had 19 receptions for 53 yards last season. The big thing with Jonathan Taylor is ever since he had that number 1 overall pick kind of curse, those times when these players like Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor, or even maybe like an Eckler or Kamara to an extent, who have been number 1 players, potentially number 1 overall, that just kind of hit a wall and just completely fall off. It's even more prevalent at the running back position. But remember that year in 2021 where he had 332 carries, 1,811 yards, and 18 touchdowns? Yeah. The next year, granted, he only played in 11 games, but 192 carries, 861 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then last year, only 7 touchdowns on 741 yards rushing. Again, only in 10 games. Obviously, some injury. He had some contract stuff early on as well. So it's just one of those situations where there's a lot of risk with Jonathan Taylor, but I do like him at this 5 spot because of what he's done and that upside there. It'd be the same thing with Henry if there was a situation in Tennessee. I probably wouldn't rank him as high because the Colts do have a good running attack. They have a good offensive line. Now I'm also curious to see how he's going to play with Anthony Richardson. I don't believe they played in the game together. I could be wrong. If it was just briefly. So it's kind of a risk with Jonathan Taylor. I think he is drafted a little bit too high. He's drafted at the very end of the first round if you're in a 12-team league. I would draft him at the mid to end of the second round, but I got to put him at the number 5 spot just because he's shown what he's been able to do. The biggest thing is, can he stay healthy? Can he be happy with his contract? And can he play alongside Anthony Richardson? Because that Colts offense could completely skyrocket this season. And a big part of that is going to be Jonathan Taylor and his success, particularly in the red zone, which would be prime fantasy value for him. Okay, number 4.
At number 4, this is where I have Jonathan Taylor. I'm a big Jonathan Taylor fan. I don't know if it was because I had him in fantasy that 2021 season. I got him like the 8th round or something like that. Or
Those are the hold on, I just want to throw out that's like the best feeling ever when like you get like an 8th, 9th round like snag and he ends up being like the best player at the position.
And then you just follow him for the rest of his career. Like you always
Right,
just hope
yeah.
that another season that you're going to get him again.
Yep.
Or it could be because my roommate was a huge Colts fan, and I was watching Colts game every single year, and I had Jonathan Taylor last year also. I remember calling you mid-draft, like it was like the 6th round or 7th round in my COSO draft, and I called you, and I was like, all right, do I draft him? Like, I already have my
Right.
2-star running backs, like, do I take the risk here? I'm lucky I did, because I did win that league last year. But I think him being fully healthy, all the contract stuff behind him, he could could have a very similar season. Now I don't think he'll have the rushing touchdowns at 18. I think closer to like 13 is a good amount because Anthony Richardson I think is going to take up a lot of those rushing attempts. But with Anthony Richardson, they're not going to want him to take hits. I mean they got on for like 3.5 games, 2.5 games basically last year, and they're just going to be like, hey, Jonathan Taylor's right there, and you're either have to rush and you're going to take a hit or dump it off Jonathan Taylor. Go jump it off Jonathan Taylor and let him go make a play. Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he's never been big in the receiving yards and receptions, but he's been giving you very consistent numbers. I mean, he's going to give you 30 to 40 receiving receptions, give you 300 to 400 yards there. Uh, he's not going to give you many touchdowns, though. He only had four so far in his first 4 years, and his high was two. Um, he's going to give you a couple, one or two there, but I think on the rushing side, they're going to want to try to get that rushing game going. In my opinion, once again, within, I want to say probably 8 yards, 7 yards, it's either Jonathan Taylor rushing for a touchdown or Anthony Richardson rushing for a touchdown. I don't think they're going to have, or I don't think they're going to want to take the risk of putting the ball in the air for a potential interception. I think they're just going to try to keep it on the ground once they get within that red zone or within like 5 yards. I mean, it's going to be three straight rush attempts either by Jonathan Taylor or Anthony Richardson. I'm going to bet Jonathan Taylor, if you give him two rush attempts within 5 yards, he's going to make a play and get in there.
So for me, I'm going to go ahead and go with Breece Hall at the number 4. Now, this may surprise some people. I know Breece Hall has been sometimes projected as the number 2. I think we all know who the number 1 projected is, but as high as number 2. I have him at 4, and here's why. Look, Breece Hall, obviously a great season last year. 223 carries for 994 yards, 5 touchdowns, but 591 receiving yards on 76 receptions and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he had some spurts where he just completely you busted through it. I mean, week 16, 43 points, week 17, 20, 28, and then week 18, 29. I mean, talk about winning a championship. If you had Breece Hall on your team, you probably were in a great spot, especially in the postseason. I'm curious to see how Breece Hall plays with Aaron Rodgers because, look, Aaron Rodgers, and I've watched a lot of Aaron Rodgers, unfortunately, dominate the Vikings. But it feels to me that Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame. Well, he is a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he's a Hall of Fame quarterback because he's had two great running backs. For example, on the Packers, when he's had two great running backs really run the football, have a running back that's more elusive and a kind of bang bang bully running back, kind of like a Jones Dillon situation. And I think that's going to be what's going to happen this year. I think Breece Hall is obviously going to have tremendous success running the football and catching the football. But I think Braylon Allen, who I have as my 35th overall running back, really has the potential to step up because, look, he's a talented running back. A lot of people have the same concerns about Jonathan Taylor coming from Wisconsin. Look what Jonathan Taylor did. I would argue that Braylon Allen's way more athletic than Jonathan Taylor, and he serves as that big-time running back for the Jets. And I think that's going to take away some Breece Hall options. It's going to take away some Breece Hall touchdowns. Even though he had 5 rushing touchdowns, it's going to lower his rushing yards and potentially receiving yards, depending on where they're at in the situation. And Aaron Rodgers at the quarterback position is going to want to establish himself with his wide receivers, guys that he's developed earlier connections with. So I think Breece Hall, talent-wise, is a good option. He's still going to be my number 4 running back. I just think people are drafting him a little bit too high. He does have the upside to go to number 2, but I think with Braylon Allen getting more production than people are expecting and Aaron Rodgers at the quarterback position, it could be a tricky situation. So I faded him a little bit, but still I would select him probably end of first round, early second round, depending on kind of who was taken on the board before that. Okay, number 3.
Yeah, 3. This is where I put Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is going to put very similar numbers as last year. Maybe some more rushing touchdowns because he's actually going to have a quarterback there where he's not having to do everything for himself on the ground. He actually has someone back there being able to pass the ball and not have to worry about having to create in different ways. The one thing I will say is I don't think he'll have 76 receptions again. As good as Aaron Rodgers is and loves throwing to his running backs, a lot of those receptions came from, hey, Mike White's my quarterback, and we're down in a game, and I'm out rushing the ball, and I'm really the only option we'll dump off. And I feel like that's how it was most of his season last year, especially towards the end of the year. They were kind of, I remember games where he was giving 12 receptions for like 150 yards on the through the air, but only like 70 rushing yards. I think his touchdowns overall will go up. I'm a little bit scared about his yards and his receptions going down because of Braylon. I think Braylon is a good mixture there. Be able to give Breece Hall a little bit of a breather and him not having to be out there as much. But I think his touchdowns, only having 9 last year, could definitely go up. I could see him getting closer to like 15 combined touchdowns, but his yards and receptions going down, so that will have to counteract against itself. But again, I think with that touchdown value potentially going up by a good amount, that it doesn't really matter with the yards and receptions going down.
Yeah, so for me, my number 3 is going to be Gibbs. I'll talk about Gibbs in a second. But one of the main reasons why, also, I forgot to mention with Breece Hall was the fact that, look, he didn't have a quarterback. I mean, he didn't. And so there was a lot more rushing value just because they had like 7 different quarterbacks. They were just picking up guys off the street, trying to find somebody to piece together. And they almost made the playoffs for a period of time. So I do think that production is going to go back a little bit as well, just because of the fact that, look, I mean, they are in a situation where they didn't have a quarterback, but now that they do, kind of how they're going to open the field is going to be interesting. As mentioned, for me, my number 3 is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Look, Jahmyr Gibbs is one of those guys that I think we both can agree, and 95% of America can agree. We're not expecting the season that Jahmyr Gibbs had last season. And to be quite frank, the season that not only did Jahmyr Gibbs have, but also David Montgomery, the season that he had. Jahmyr Gibbs and Breece Hall are the same as far as, a PPR type running back. Jahmyr Gibbs had 945 yards for 10 touchdowns, 316 receiving yards for only 1 receiving touchdown, which was strange. But still, I like Jahmyr Gibbs more than I like Breece Hall, just because we saw what Jahmyr Gibbs was able to do with a quarterback, right? They have the same system there. They have Jared Goff, they recently extended. Still got David Montgomery. You know what you're going to get out of Jahmyr Gibbs. You don't know what you're going to get out of Breece Hall. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more skeptical on Breece Hall compared to Jahmyr Gibbs. But Jahmyr Gibbs is definitely going to push up that value. He's going to push up success, and he's overall going to probably have more fantasy production, and could push the ranks for number 2 and number 1. But I'll tell you why, obviously, that I don't have them or have him in the top 2. But I definitely think being in that system 1 year, we saw what he did his rookie year, is only going to continue to grow. Even alongside David Montgomery, they complement each other well. For some reason, they go away from David Montgomery. Gibbs' production is going to soar as well, but I think they'll kind of stick with that because they don't really care about fantasy, and I don't blame them. They care about offensive efficiency, and it had a really good tandem 1-2. And the PPR areas, which if you're in PPR leagues is huge, is going to go to Jahmyr Gibbs, not David Montgomery. Okay, number 2.
So number 2, I have Bijan, the other rookie running back there. That's gotten into the top 10 as of last year. I mean, last year in 17 games, really only 16. He played, I believe, in week 17 or 16 or whatever it was, but had like 2 snaps or something like that, and then had like we didn't play because of like a headache or something. And they knew that he was going to play, but they still hadn't suited up. But he had only 214 rush attempts, which is kind of surprising. I think that if he's able to get to that 250, 275 there, he could almost get 1,500 yards, in my opinion. He's that good of a running back. And I'm just talking about on the ground. Through the air last year, had almost 500 on 58 receptions. His big thing is only 8 total touchdowns, which isn't horrible. But would have expected from that Falcons offense for him to get the ball a lot more in that goal line, which he really didn't. It seemed like Tyler Algier was that running back there at the goal line. And maybe it was a better personnel fit in that situation, but Bijan is such a beast at receiving and rushing that you got to give him those opportunities at the goal line. He's one of those guys who has some of the biggest upside in the running back room. I really hope, knock on wood, this isn't a Saquon Barkley type of thing where he has a lot of yards, a lot of receptions, but barely any touchdowns his rookie year, and this kind of stays at a low touchdown, high reception, or high yardage type of running back. Because if he's able to get those touchdowns, his value could push him up into the RB1 position, or at least try to argue for that RB1 position. I think they have Kirk Cousins now, an actual quarterback. They don't have Heineke or Ritter. Yeah, asterisks on actual quarterback. But better than Ritter, better than Mariota there, better than Heineke there. I mean, he's got a quarterback who will throw him the ball. He's got a quarterback where they don't have to stack the box because, you know what, we're just going to put pressure on Ritter, and, if they hand it off, then we have 7 guys in the box, 8 guys in the box to try to go tackle him. So I think with a better spread out offense, Bijan just has all the upside. I think that if he's able to repeat what he did, honestly, he doesn't even need more yards. If he got 6 more touchdowns, 4 more touchdowns, uh, he's an RB2. I mean, I want to say he finished top 5. He finished top 5 last year. No, he finished number 12, which is kind of surprising. I thought he would have finished a little bit higher, but again, his upside there of just his pure ability as a football player, as a running back, could push him into that top 10 really easily. I just expect him with a much better quarterback and a more spread out offense that he's going to be able to get the ball more efficiently and more effectively in the red zone.
Yeah, I got Bijan at my number 2 as well. I mean, last year there was a lot of expectations for Bijan. I think on average, he was picked like 6 overall. And I was one of those guys that was super hesitant because Arthur Smith was the head coach and calling plays. And I feel like you don't want to discredit what he did last season, but you can kind of discredit it because it was an Arthur Smith offense. Now he gets a new coach, he gets a new quarterback finally, and just opens up a lot more opportunities. So there's a lot of things to be excited about with Bijan. And, relatively, he played really well. I mean, he was a great PPR option. Besides his headache game where he scored zero point 0.4 points against Carolina, actually had a really great season. And as mentioned, 58 receptions for 487 yards and 4 touchdowns is great for a running back as a whole. Then you add the 214 carries for 976 yards, but only 4 touchdowns. So that's one of those things that he did the bare minimum, kind of, and so he's going to only probably go up. So I really think that his value is there. I also think too that he would be the RB1 if it wasn't for Christian McCaffrey, but I think he still got the opportunity to do so. I remember listening to a podcast and reading it online. Now this is from Bijan, okay, but he had said that the Falcons are really trying to kind of integrate him into a Christian McCaffrey type role. What that entails is obviously being the main running back, where he's rushing the football, catching the football, and could potentially not put up the similar numbers, or he could, of 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards. But that is something to note. I have the number 4 pick in one of my leagues that we've already done the draft order for, and I am leaning towards a wide receiver, and I'll probably go with wide receiver. But the value you could get from Bijan inside, I would say top 3, probably not, but 4, 5, or 6, where maybe sometimes he's getting drafted 8, 9, 10, could really prove to be extremely valuable, especially if Bijan is kind of using that Christian McCaffrey role. You lose Cordell Patterson, you still have Algier, who should have production, but it should be a win-win situation nonetheless for Bijan with a new quarterback, a new system, and tremendous talent. I mean, we've seen some of the moves he's put on defenders. It's kind of insane and scary if you're in that division. Hint, hint. Okay, I think I know, but who's your number 1 running back?
Yeah, so I have the biggest upside or biggest boom or bust in Christian McCaffrey. I mean, last year I had a career high in basically everything. Receptions, not really, because he's at 107, 116 when he's in Carolina, but 67 receptions, 564 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, which was a career high. He had a career high in rushing yards at 1,459. He second in his career high in his career 14 rushing touchdowns, but I mean everyone know he did. I mean he scored more than a touchdown per game through the air and on the ground. I mean just super effective in that 49ers offense. He has second high in total touches at 339 last year. One of the crazy parts in 2023 last year he had 2023 total yards, which was kind of weird to see that's how it happened, but yeah, I don't know. Like Christian McCaffrey could either have another season exactly like this, or you could see him have a season where he finishes the RB5 because he misses a game or two. One of the big things right now he's dealing with a calf injury, so he's not going to be playing in any preseason games. They're just having him rest and recover. That's I wouldn't say a big issue for me, but like if I had the first overall pick and everyone's expecting me to draft Saquon, McCaffrey, I may be questioning who I'm drafting. I mean, if he's dealing with an injury, how much do I really want to draft him? Do I take the risk there of him having that injury history? It's a big question mark. I mean, he has some high upside. I mean, we saw it. He's been a thousand guy, 1,000 rushing yards, 1,000 receiving yards, and within those years, he's had over 100 receptions. He's gonna and 6 touchdowns and 15 on the rushing touchdowns. So he has that potential to do all that. And we saw him finally kind of do it last year. Maybe not as his peak numbers, but like got pretty close to what his peak numbers could be at each in each category. But if with the risk there, I mean, you have to put him there at number 1 because of the value he can give you. But that risk there is super high on the other hand.
Yeah, look, I mean, C-Mac, number 1, but there is a lot of question marks as you laid out. I mean, this is all basically PPR rankings. That's what we based our rankings on. And the fact that he's the number 1 running back in overall number 1 player in a PPR heavy early on draft with like Jamar Chase, Jefferson, Hill, CeeDee Lamb really says something about C-Mac. But the production's obviously there. I mean, he put up 1,000 and 1,000 in Carolina. Now, granted, he's entering his 9th NFL season. He's 28, so he's getting a little bit older. I'm still expecting tremendous value because obviously Christian McCaffrey, he just looks like an absolute unit. He looks like he could have 4 or 5 more years of good production. But with how kind of dry the running back situation seems to be year in year out, he could only have two more great years, or this could have been it. Like this could be a really bad year for him. I think the calf strain's worth mentioning because think of a time like last year, or it was 2 years ago, with Cooper Kupp, who was projected to be either the number one overall fantasy player, top three. He was dealing with something similar. I don't remember what it was exactly, where he ended up missing the preseason, hoping to rest, ended up missing, I think it was the first 3 or 4 games, and never was the same. So that is similar to that as far as where he's being drafted right now. If you're the number 101 and you can't trade the pick, I'm 100% taking McCaffery. But just know there is potential for him to not be as productive as Christian McCaffrey has been in the past. And Kyle Shanahan has come out and said they're planning to use Elijah Mitchell more this year to preserve Christian McCaffrey because the offensive line can open the holes for him. He doesn't have to do too much work. But hopefully to preserve Christian McCaffrey, get 1 or 2 more productive years, which could still be really good for him, but could limit his production as well as kind of limit his production from last year, even though his production last year was absolutely insane. But it's just some things to think about. If you're at the 101, you got to go with McCaffrey. If you get McCaffrey, it's a win-win situation. But it is something to monitor with that calf strain. And if it's one of those things that he goes on the PUP list or he's on IR, that's something that you're going to have to consider, or just know that the risk of that could end up being really bad for you. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter, The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you guys looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharply focused on memory? Look no further than the Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports AZ and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity, while also maintaining an ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON 15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Nile Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.